Trumpovo vlado je v času Bidenovega predsedovanja prerasel tehnološko in tudi politično hladno vojno.
Nedavni obisk ameriške finančne ministrice na Kitajskem je vsekakor razumeti kot poskus zgladitve napetosti med državama. Ob koncu srečanj sta obe strani zagotavljali, da so bili pogovori konstruktivni in odprti.
My objective during this trip has been to establish and deepen relationships with the new economic leadership team in place in Beijing. Our discussions are part of a broader, concerted effort to stabilize the relationship, reduce the risk of misunderstanding, and discuss areas of cooperation.
Da med državama obstajajo pomembna nesoglasja ni skrivnost. Kitajska prevzema primat v celi kopici strateških industrij, od jeklarstva do telekomunikacij, od obnovljivih energetskih virov do pogonskih elementov za ameriške rakete. Grožnja nacionalni varnosti, je prepričan uradni Washington, ki sprejema vedno nove ukrepe za zajezitev kitajske moči.
Chinese government is deeply concerned that recent US actions in the export control arena primarily are pushing Chinese companies out of global supply chains. And so what it has done is created a sort of panic moment that China really needs to wean itself off of reliance on foreign technologies.
Kitajska Ameriki odgovarja s podobnimi ukrepi. Nedavno je tako napovedala omejitev izvoza galija in germanija, kovin pomembnih za razvoj računalniških čipov.
加者相关物项具有明显的军民两用的属性，对其实施出口管制是国际通行做法。
Ne samo trgovinsko-tehnološka vojna, odnose med ZDA in Kitajsko kali tudi vprašanje Tajvana.
In v studiu je z nami ameriška strokovnjakinja za konkurenčnost in kibernetsko varnost, Liza Tobin, ki je bila med drugim direktorica za Kitajsko v ameriškem svetu za nacionalno varnost. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
What is the purpose of your visit to Slovenia?
I came to Slovenia at the request of our U.S. State Department to talk to Slovenian private sector and government stakeholders on issues related to digital infrastructure and network security. Slovenia has a lot of important decisions coming up about your critical infrastructure and data protection and things like that. And so I came to share some of our American experiences dealing with these issues.
Very interesting. You work for a non-profit foundation that strives for American position in the world of new technologies that affect security, the economy, and society. Are the United States still a leading force in the world of new technologies?
I think the generative AI revolution, all these things we've seen developing in the last 6 or 8 months, ChatGPT, Bard, these large language models that are doing really amazing things, shows that the United States is still a serious force to be reckoned. But my organization was established a couple of years ago because we were concerned that the United States was actually slipping behind China, and specifically
China, yeah?
Yeah. And so I was working in the US government several years ago, and in government we started having some unpleasant technology surprises where we looked around and we realized the People's Republic of China is actually getting ahead of us on some important technologies that matter for our economy and our security. And a couple examples are 5G, fifth generation wireless networks, which a lot of countries are rolling out right now and are important for connectivity and our digital economies. And China actually was getting ahead with their state-controlled firms like Huawei and ZTE. And the United States found itself without a similar systems integrating large major firm that could export solutions around the world and compete with Huawei.
Can you also assess the position of the European Union?
So in particular on 5G, since we're talking about that, Europe actually has 2 really great major firms, Ericsson and Nokia, that still build this network hardware. And so we think that's great, and we want to have a lot of options around the world in countries like Finland and Sweden and other European countries and the United States, democracies where companies operate in the rule of law. And there's transparency and rule of law, things where companies operate within these systems, within the rules. Companies in China like Huawei don't operate in the same system. They're essentially agents of the state and beholden to the Chinese Communist Party. So we're not really operating on a level playing field.
What about Slovenia?
Slovenia is doing some really interesting things. I've had a great visit here, too short, to this beautiful country and interacted with some folks at your private sector down at the port in Koper as well as here in Ljubljana. And so there's a lot of really interesting work being done on digital infrastructure and also in how we think about privacy and protecting the data that flows on these networks. So it's been very eye-opening to see what's going on here in Slovenia.
And it's not so bad.
No, there's actually a lot of really forward-thinking work and some good work being done at your university on artificial intelligence as well.
Last question. U.S. Treasury Secretary visited China a few days ago and said that Washington and Beijing must communicate directly when one of them is concerned about certain economic practice of the other country. Is this a sign that relations between the U.S. and China are starting to improve?
I see this really as a change in tone, much more than a change in strategy on either side. The U.S. is really committed to this shift towards strategic competition, and I think on the Chinese side it's quite clear that they're pursuing a long-term strategy to eventually displace the United States and the European Union and other democratic nations and groups of nations to lead the world, and they see technology as really crucial in this. So I think coming out of the visit, it was very important on the US side to maintain open lines of communication. We always want to talk and we always want to listen and make sure we're communicating clearly. But the direction of travel is clear, that this is a systems rivalry, to actually borrow the EU term for this relationship, which I think better captures this moment that we're in together on both sides of the Atlantic in dealing with the systemic rival in the People's Republic of China.
Thank you very much for visiting us tonight.
Thank you.
No, tudi nocoj se ne moremo izogniti vročinskemu